A serene Sunday afternoon was abruptly disrupted by an unexpected knock on the bathroom door, an event that would irrevocably alter the tranquility of the day. The sun, a benevolent overseer, bathed the small suburban home in a warm golden glow, casting long lazy shadows that seemed to slow the passage of time. Sundays were traditionally my sanctuary, a day for introspection, for escaping into the digital realm of video games, a respite from the demands of the week. However, this particular Sunday held an unforeseen divergence from the usual routine. After lunch, I retreated to the bathroom, seeking solace in solitude. The bathroom had always been my haven, a sanctuary where the clamor of the outside world faded into insignificance. I intended to indulge in a leisurely scroll through my phone, perhaps a game or two, savoring the quietude. Unbeknownst to me, this seemingly ordinary afternoon was about to take an unexpected turn. A faint rhythmic sound, the echo of footsteps, reverberated through the hallway. Initially, I dismissed it as inconsequential. The familiar creaks of the old house, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant murmur of the television. Yet, these footsteps possessed an unusual cadence, deliberate and purposeful, culminating in a soft but distinct knock on the bathroom door. It was not an urgent, demanding knock, but rather an unsettling intrusion upon my solitude. My mother's voice, overly cheerful, followed, "Hey sweetheart, you in there?" I furrowed my brow, glancing at the closed door. "Yeah, Mom, I'll be out in a minute," I replied. Her response, though seemingly innocuous, carried an unsettlingly bright tone. "Take your time." The footsteps receded down the hallway, and I resumed my phone, attempting to dismiss the peculiar interaction. My mother was not the type to inquire about my whereabouts in the bathroom. We were not a family that required constant updates on each other's movements. Yet, today, she felt compelled to acknowledge my presence, albeit through the closed door. It was an oddity, certainly, but hardly worth dwelling upon. Or so I convinced myself. Minutes passed, and the house once again descended into a peaceful silence, punctuated only by the gentle caress of the wind against the windows. I endeavored to relax, but the lingering echo of that unexpected knock persisted in the recesses of my mind. My mother's voice, that unsettlingly cheerful tone, felt off. I shook my head, attempting to dispel the growing unease. Perhaps she was simply in an unusually buoyant mood. Maybe she wished to discuss something later, or perhaps it was merely a routine check-in. But despite my attempts to rationalize her behavior, the unsettling strangeness of the encounter remained. Just as I began to regain a semblance of composure, the footsteps returned. This time, they were slower, more hesitant, and my pulse quickened inexplicably. She stood outside the door again. But why? "Everything okay in there?" Her voice, now subdued, almost hesitant, pierced the stillness. Yeah," I replied, my voice cracking slightly. "I'll be out soon." A long, uncomfortable silence ensued before she responded, "All right." Yet, she remained stationary, her presence palpable just beyond the door. My heart began to pound against my ribs. I couldn't pinpoint the source of my anxiety, but an undeniable tension permeated the air. I rose to my feet, observing my reflection in the mirror. I appeared unchanged, the same disheveled hair, the same worn hoodie. Yet, the ambiance of the room had shifted, a heavy, unsettling weight settling upon it. After what felt like an eternity, her footsteps finally receded down the hallway. I exhaled, realizing that I had been unconsciously holding my breath. The unease, however, remained. I splashed cold water on my face, hoping to wash away the strange tension that had enveloped me. The cool water offered a momentary respite, but it did little to alleviate the turmoil in my mind. Wrapping a towel round my waist, I cautiously opened the bathroom door and stepped into the hallway. Everything appeared normal. The familiar photographs adorning the walls, the soft filtered light. Yet, the atmosphere felt subtly altered, as if the very air within the house had shifted imperceptibly. I walked down the hallway, my bare feet making soft, rhythmic sounds against the hardwood floor. As I passed my mother's room, the closed door, as always, offered no indication of any unusual activity. I continued towards my own room at the end of the hall, but as I reached for the doorknob, something caught my eye. The door was slightly ajar, a mere crack, yet it was enough to send a jolt of panic through me. My mother never entered my room without first seeking permission. I pushed the door open slowly, half expecting to find her standing within. The room was empty. Everything was in its usual place, the bed neatly made, my clothes piled haphazardly on the chair, my desk a chaotic tableau of papers and miscellaneous objects. Yet, there was an undeniable anomaly, a subtle yet undeniable presence. The faint lingering scent of my mother's perfume hung in the air. It was a subtle aroma, barely perceptible, yet it served as irrefutable evidence of her recent presence. She had been in here. But why? And what had she been doing? I sat on the edge of the bed, my mind racing. Perhaps she had simply intended to tidy up, or perhaps she had required something from my room. But these explanations seemed inadequate. She never engaged in such activities, and the fact that she had not mentioned it during her earlier inquiry at the bathroom door only deepened the enigma. I lay back on the bed, gazing at the ceiling, desperately trying to unravel the mystery. The more I pondered the events, the more questions surfaced. Why had she entered my room without informing me? Why had she lingered outside the bathroom door in such an unsettling manner? And why did I have the distinct impression that she was concealing something from me? But the story did not end there. As the afternoon progressed, I found myself reliving the events, dissecting every detail, attempting to decipher the source of the unsettling tension that had inexplicably permeated the atmosphere. An unsettling unease had taken root, a disquiet I couldn't quite articulate. Despite my attempts to dismiss it as insignificant, a profound sense of impending change lingered. The days that followed the unsettling bathroom encounter were anything but ordinary. An invisible chasm had opened between my mother and me, a palpable shift in the air that defied explanation. It wasn't a dramatic rupture, no explosive argument, but a subtle yet undeniable alteration in our dynamic, a line crossed that neither of us acknowledged. I vacillated between the urge to address this unspoken tension and the paralyzing fear of doing so. The tension, though subtle, was undeniable, a simmering current beneath the surface of our daily interactions. It manifested in subtle ways, her gaze lingering a touch too long, her eyes quickly darting away as if caught in a forbidden act. Her presence seemed to amplify, her orbit expanding to encompass every corner of my existence. I found myself constantly encountering her. In the living room while I attempted to unwind. In the kitchen during my casual snack raids. Even while I sought refuge in the digital world of video games. She would be there, folding laundry, her presence a silent, yet intrusive intrusion. Initially, I attributed these encounters to mere coincidence. Perhaps she yearned for increased companionship, or perhaps she grappled with an unspoken concern. However, the frequency of these encounters, the almost deliberate nature of her proximity, dispelled any notion of chance. An underlying current, a hidden agenda, pulsed beneath the surface, a truth neither of us dared to confront. One evening, we found ourselves ensconced on the couch, the flickering television casting an ethereal glow upon the darkened living room. The only sounds were the muted dialogue of the program and the rhythmic clinking of ice in her glass. I attempted to focus on the unfolding narrative, but my attention was repeatedly drawn back to her. She sat beside me, closer than usual, her proximity generating an unexpected warmth that sent shivers down my spine. My heart quickened inexplicably. She spoke sparingly, her occasional comments about the program laden with an unspoken weight, each word carrying the weight of a hidden meaning. My eyes remained fixed on the screen, Yet my mind was consumed by the physical space between us. Or rather, the disconcerting lack thereof. Every brush of her arm against mine sent a jolt of electricity through my system, leaving me bewildered by my sudden hyper-awareness of her every movement. As the credits rolled, a sense of relief washed over me, a desperate yearning for distance. I reached for the remote, intending to extinguish the glow of the television and create some much-needed space. However, before I could act, she spoke. "You've really grown up," she observed, her voice a hushed murmur, tinged with a pensive undercurrent. I paused, the remote hovering in my hand, unsure how to respond. "Yeah, I guess so," I mumbled, glancing at her from the corner of my eye. Her gaze, however, was unsettling. She regarded me with an intensity that sent a jolt of apprehension through me, as if seeing me not as her son, but as someone entirely new, someone older, someone different. A heavy silence descended, the stillness punctuated by the erratic thumping of my heart against my ribs. I sought to fill the void, to break the suffocating silence, but the words seemed to catch in my throat. Then, she made an unexpected move. Slowly, deliberately, she reached out and placed her hand on mine. The touch was gentle, yet it sent a surge of electricity through my entire being. My breath hitched in my throat. The primal instinct to recoil, to withdraw, surged within me, yet I remained frozen, paralyzed by an inexplicable force. I sat there, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs as her fingers gently curled around mine. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, her voice barely audible in the hushed atmosphere. Her hand lingered for a fleeting moment, then slowly withdrew, leaving behind a chilling emptiness where her warmth had resided. I finally exhaled, my mind reeling from the unexpected encounter. "Thanks," I managed, the words sounding hollow, devoid of genuine emotion. My gaze returned to the television screen, but I no longer perceived the images. My thoughts were a chaotic whirlwind, desperately seeking to comprehend the enigmatic events that had just transpired. I felt her gaze upon me, her eyes meticulously scanning every contour of my face. But I couldn't bring myself to meet her gaze, not after that. She rose abruptly, breaking the suffocating silence that had descended upon us. "I'm going to bed," she announced, her voice regaining its usual composure. It was as if nothing had transpired, as if the line that had been crossed remained invisible, unacknowledged. "Good night," I replied, my gaze still fixed on the screen, my mind grappling with the profound implications of the encounter. As soon as the sound of her retreating footsteps faded, I released the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My mind was a tempest of conflicting emotions, confusion, a burgeoning curiosity, and an unsettling awareness of emotions I desperately wished to deny. Why had I remained motionless? Why hadn't I withdrawn my hand? And most unsettling of all, was this merely the beginning of a descent into the unknown? The following days were a torturous exercise in avoidance. I sought refuge in my room, inventing excuses to leave the house, desperate to escape the suffocating tension that permeated every corner of our shared space. Yet, no matter how diligently I attempted to evade her, the memory of that evening, the lingering sensation of her touch, the unspoken words that hung heavy in the air, continued to haunt me. One evening, while grappling with my homework, a soft knock sounded at my door. My heart lurched. "Come in," I called out, my voice betraying a hint of apprehension. She entered, her demeanor unusually hesitant. "Hey," she murmured, standing just inside the doorway, as if unsure of her welcome. "Can you help me with something in the garage?" she asked. I hesitated, the prospect of being alone with her in the confined space of the garage filling me with a mixture of dread and a strange forbidden anticipation. Yet, I couldn't refuse. "Sure," I agreed, rising to my feet and following her down the hallway. The garage was a cavernous space, dimly illuminated by a single bare bulb. She led me to a towering stack of boxes, her words about organizing them sounding distant, irrelevant. My mind was consumed by the palpable tension that crackled in the air between us. As we worked side by side, moving the boxes, I felt the invisible barrier between us shrinking. Despite the physical distance that separated us, an unspoken force, a magnetic pull, seemed to draw us inexorably closer. I stole a glance at her, our gazes meeting for a fleeting moment. In that brief instant, something shifted within her eyes. A raw vulnerability, a desperate longing that sent a tremor through my very core. Without warning, she stepped closer, her hand brushing against mine, sending a jolt of raw electricity through my entire being. I froze, paralyzed by indecision, my mind screaming at me to retreat, to break free from this invisible, yet inescapable, pull. Yet, I remained rooted to the spot, unable to move, unable to speak. The silence that followed was deafening, suffocating. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she uttered words that shattered the fragile calm. "I've been thinking about you a lot." My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat echoing in my ears. I opened my mouth to respond, to say something, anything, but the words remained trapped within my throat. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process the implications of her confession. Then, before I could comprehend the unfolding events, she leaned in. The space between us vanished, her breath warm against my skin. My mind went blank, the world narrowing down to the intensity of the moment, the proximity of her face, the intoxicating scent of her perfume. It was wrong, undeniably wrong. Yet, there was no resisting the inexorable force that drew us together. The ensuing moments were a blur, a surreal suspension of time, where every sensation was amplified, every movement agonizingly slow. Her face, inches from mine, was a blur of emotions, a mixture of longing and apprehension. Her breath, warm and soft against my skin, sent shivers down my spine. For the first time in my life, reality seemed to slip away, replaced by a disorienting haze of sensations and emotions. My thoughts were a chaotic tangle, a bewildering array of emotions I couldn't begin to comprehend. Irreversibility hung heavy in the air, a palpable sense of inevitability that I couldn't shake. Her eyes locked on mine, searched, pleaded, for some form of acquiescence, a tacit permission that I, in my bewilderment, was strangely inclined to grant. Before I could fully comprehend the implications of my acquiescence, her lips descended upon mine, a soft, hesitant touch that sent a jolt of unfamiliar sensation through my entire being. My body stiffened, the sudden realization of our transgression crashing over me like a cold wave. Yet I remained rooted, paralyzed by an inexplicable force. An invisible current, a magnetic pull, held me captive, preventing me from breaking free. The kiss was fleeting, a mere brush of lips. Yet in that fleeting moment, the world seemed to tilt on its axis. The garage, the towering boxes, the cold metallic air, all faded into insignificance. Only the sensation of her lips against mine remained, a novel and unsettling experience, a yearning I hadn't realized I harbored. As she pulled back, her eyes widened, a complex tapestry of emotions, fear, confusion, perhaps even a flicker of regret, swirling within their depths. Before I could decipher the meaning behind those emotions, before I could even process the whirlwind of sensations that had just engulfed me, she kissed me again. This time, there was no hesitation, no timidity. It was a deeper, more intense exploration, a thrilling descent into the unknown. My heart pounded against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat that I feared she could hear. Yet, instead of recoiling, I found myself leaning into the kiss, my mind reeling from the unexpected turn of events. An invisible barrier seemed to shatter, releasing a torrent of emotions that I struggled to contain. There was a desperate intensity in her embrace, a fear of losing this newfound connection, a need that mirrored my own. But there was no time for introspection, no time for doubt. The intensity of the moment consumed me, a whirlwind of emotions that left me breathless and disoriented. Suddenly, we stumbled backward, tumbling out of the garage and into the hushed serenity of the house. A heavy silence descended upon us, more eloquent than any words could have been. We both understood the gravity of what had transpired, the line irrevocably crossed. Yet neither of us possessed the courage to articulate the unspoken. We found ourselves in the living room, the very space where this unsettling journey had begun. The dim glow of the television casting long, eerie shadows that amplified the surreal nature of the situation. My pulse quickened as she approached, her gaze unwavering, her every move imbued with a palpable tension. The air crackled with anticipation, the weight of the unspoken hanging heavy in the air, as if the very universe held its breath. Her hand found mine, her fingers intertwining with mine in a way that felt both strangely familiar and profoundly unsettling. A flicker of doubt, a momentary hesitation, crossed her features, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. She leaned in once more, her lips meeting mine with an urgency that surpassed the earlier encounters. Our bodies intertwined, lost in the intoxicating rhythm of the moment. Time seemed to lose all meaning, suspended in a timeless void. There was no thought, no analysis, only the raw, unfiltered intensity of the experience. We moved as one, a seamless dance of exploration and discovery. Each touch, each fleeting glance, sent a jolt of electricity through my veins. There was no turning back now, no escape from the intoxicating spiral of our newfound intimacy. As the minutes, or perhaps hours, slipped away, the intensity began to subside, replaced by a quieter, more profound connection. We lay side by side, the soft cushions of the couch, a welcome respite from the emotional tempest that had engulfed us. I could feel the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest against my shoulder, a comforting reminder of our shared experience. My mind, which had been a whirlwind of chaotic thoughts moments before, began to quiet, but the profound impact of our actions remained undeniable. I awoke to the gentle caress of morning light filtering through the curtains, illuminating the quietude of the living room. The stillness of the room, a stark contrast to the emotional tempest of the previous night, brought the gravity of our actions into sharp focus. My mother was gone, the lingering scent of her perfume, the only evidence of her presence. I sat up slowly, the events of the night unfolding like a vivid yet unsettling dream. The reality of our transgression, the irrevocable nature of our actions, washed over me in a tidal wave. I couldn't pretend that nothing had happened, that the course of our lives hadn't been irrevocably altered. The weight of our shared secret, the unspoken consequences of our actions, loomed large. A constant reminder of the line we had crossed. A suffocating silence enveloped the house. I rose from the bed and wandered towards the kitchen, half expecting to find her there, perhaps preparing breakfast, or perhaps waiting for me, as if nothing extraordinary had transpired. The kitchen, however, was empty, mirroring the unsettling emptiness I felt within. For a fleeting moment, I wondered whether this solitude was a welcome respite or merely another layer of the mounting tension. I poured myself a glass of water, the icy liquid offering little solace against the tempest brewing within me. My mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, a chaotic tapestry of thoughts I couldn't untangle. What had we done? What unforeseen consequences awaited us? The questions multiplied, each unanswered query adding to the growing anxiety. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway, a familiar rhythm that sent my heart racing. I turned to find her standing in the doorway, her expression inscrutable, a mask of composure that belied the turmoil within. A heavy silence descended, the air thick with unspoken words, the tension palpable. "Good morning," she finally murmured, her voice subdued, almost hesitant. "Morning," I replied, my voice strained, the word catching in my throat. I yearned to delve deeper, to inquire about her thoughts, to unravel the enigma that had consumed us. But the words remained trapped, unwilling to breach the chasm that had opened between us. The atmosphere felt fragile, delicately poised on the precipice of something unknown. An eternity seemed to pass in the suffocating silence, each second amplifying the weight of the unspoken. Finally, she broke the spell. "I've been thinking about last night," she confessed, her voice steady, yet a tremor betrayed the underlying turmoil. "About what happened?" I swallowed hard, the familiar tightness returning to my chest. This was the inevitable confrontation, the conversation I had both dreaded and anticipated. We couldn't continue to exist in this state of suspended animation, pretending that the events of the night before were nothing more than a fleeting dream. "Me too," I acknowledged, my voice barely a whisper. "I don't know how we got here," she admitted, her voice cracking slightly, revealing the depth of her confusion. "I don't understand what any of this means." "Neither do I," confessed honestly. "But we can't pretend it didn't happen." She nodded slowly, her gaze unwavering, a profound sadness etched on her features. "I know," she whispered, "I don't want to." The admission hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder of the irrevocable nature of our actions. We stood on the precipice of the unknown, navigating uncharted territory, the consequences of our choices looming large. I don't know what to do. Now, I confessed, my voice trembling. "Everything feels different." She sighed, running a hand through her hair, a gesture that spoke volumes about her inner turmoil. "It is different," she agreed, her voice laced with uncertainty. "But we'll figure it out. We have to." Her words, though intended to be reassuring, offered little solace. There was no roadmap, no guidebook to navigate this uncharted territory. We were adrift, lost in a sea of uncertainty. The day unfolded in a strange, surreal haze. We went through the motions of daily life, cooking, cleaning, engaging in perfunctory conversations, but the underlying tension remained, a constant, unwelcome presence. Every glance, every fleeting touch, was imbued with the unspoken weight of the previous night's events. We were trapped in a silent impasse, both afraid to confront the reality of the situation. As the hours crawled by, the weight of the unspoken became unbearable. I could no longer endure the suffocating silence, the unspoken questions hanging heavy in the air. I had to break free from this paralyzing inertia, to acknowledge the elephant in the room. We found ourselves in the living room once again, occupying opposite ends of the couch. The silence, punctuated only by the ticking of the clock, was deafening. I couldn't bear it any longer. I had to speak, to break free from the suffocating silence before it consumed me entirely. "I don't know where we go from here," I blurted out, the words cutting through the suffocating silence. "We can't pretend that everything's normal, because it's clearly not." She didn't respond immediately, her gaze fixed on an indeterminate point in the distance, her thoughts seemingly miles away. When she finally spoke, her voice was a low, resigned murmur. "I know," she acknowledged, "but I don't know how to fix this." Her words struck me with a sobering force. The realization that there might be no easy solution, that the very fabric of our relationship had been irrevocably altered, cast a long shadow over me. The thought of returning to the normalcy that once existed was a distant, almost impossible dream. "Neither do I confessed, my voice barely a whisper. She nodded slowly, her expression contemplative, as if searching for answers in the swirling eddies of her own thoughts. "Maybe we just need some time," she suggested, "to think, to figure out what we both want. Time. Was time truly the answer? I wasn't convinced, but it was the only solution we had at our disposal. Yeah, I agreed quietly. Maybe. A heavy silence descended upon us once more, but this time it felt different, imbued with a sense of finality, an unspoken acknowledgement that we couldn't move forward until we had processed the profound changes that had transpired. It was a temporary armistice, a brief respite before facing the inevitable consequences of our actions. As the night wore on, we remained side by side, yet worlds apart. An invisible chasm had opened between us, a stark reminder of the irrevocable nature of our actions. Yet, despite the growing distance, an undeniable connection, a fragile thread, still tethered us together. Finally, she rose to her feet, breaking the oppressive silence. "I'm going to bed," she murmured, her voice heavy with exhaustion, an exhaustion that transcended the physical. "Yeah, me too," I replied, though sleep seemed a distant prospect. She lingered for a moment, as if searching for the right words, for some semblance of closure. But in the end, she simply nodded and disappeared down the hallway, leaving me alone with the swirling vortex of my own thoughts. I remained seated, the weight of the day pressing down upon me with an almost physical force. The future, once a predictable path, now stretched before me, a labyrinth of uncertainty. I had no answers, no roadmap to guide me through this uncharted territory. The silence of the house enveloped me, a suffocating blanket of quietude. For the first time in a long while, a strange sense of tranquility descended upon me, a quiet acceptance of the inevitable. Nothing would ever be the same. We had crossed an invisible line, ventured into uncharted territory, and the consequences, whatever they may be, would forever alter the course of our lives. The night wore on, each passing moment a reminder of the profound changes that had transpired. We had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed, and now we were left to grapple with the unforeseen consequences of our choices. Though the night brought a semblance of quiet, a fragile peace, it offered no escape from the profound impact of our actions. The weight of our choices, the uncertainty of the future, loomed large, a constant reminder of the irrevocable nature of our transgression.